Hi, this is Contextual Engineering Project 2. We are Team Red. My name is Mu Xinliu, and I'm going to talk about the first part of the project, which is the assessment phase. One of the main elements that can be made in the assessment phase is the cultural and the social dynamics of the community. It is critical to understand the values and beliefs of the community before any project. Without this understanding, there is a risk of creating projects that do not align with the community's values and beliefs and may ultimately to unsustainable. And let's move to the next part. Another point that may be overlooked is environmental impact of the project. It is critical to assess the impact of the water project on the local environment, including the water sources, wildlife, and the overall health of the community. Failure to consider the environmental impacts can have serious consequences, such as water pollution, erosion, and climate change. Otherwise, impact on the nearby environment should be taken into account. Finally, the assessment phase may miss the sustainability of the project. Understanding the economic status of the community is critical to designing a sustainable water project. The project should be affordable, and the community must have the resources to maintain it. Failure to consider the economic conditions may result in a project that is too expensive for the community to maintain. This will lead to project failure. Okay, let's move to the next part.
So, what will happen if we don't take these factors into consideration? What kind of negative impact would this project have if we assess it in a non-contextual way? Our group come up with six aspects that need to take into consideration. For example, if we don't take the population size into consideration, the finalized project may not be able to supply water that meet everyone's needs in the community. And also, the demographics is also important because if we don't take that into consideration, like certain groups of people may be left without access to the water and the sanitation services. The economic status is also important, as some people may not be able to afford the services. On top of these, the social dynamics is also an important factor. The water project, without thinking in a contextual way, the water project may be implemented in a way that does not take into account the existing power structure or the social hierarchy. And also, we also need to fully respect the community's cultural. Otherwise, the water project may be implemented in a way that is not culturally appropriate or acceptable. And the last thing, maybe less important, but the changing political climate may be also important because it would likely affect the funding of the project.
For my part of the project, we'll be talking about the application of contextual engineering in the construction phase of the project. Number one, we need to talk about why context matters. Context matters because it allows us to design for the community in mind. It allows us to create a project that is long-term, long-lasting, and sustainable, and one that won't require further maintenance once we leave. In order to do this, we must identify our own biases, the biases of stakeholders, and we want to manage all of those by designing a solution that tries to be equally balanced to every single different stakeholder and influence the project as possible. Step one is to open our mind and go ready to be going back to the drawing board. We know the assessment phase of the project is flawed and it may be fundamentally incorrect. Therefore, we need to be ready to accept that the construction and the plan that we initially proposed may also be fundamentally incorrect and be ready to completely overhaul that if necessary. After this reset, only then can we begin to implement the actual design in a proper contextual fashion and with the knowledge of contextual engineering behind us. Step 2 is talking with the community. We know that the assessment phase did not interact with the community that much, and as a result, they feel very disconnected from the actual project, and they feel like they do not own the project, and it is an EWB project. Therefore, we need to start by talking to the community, letting them voice their concerns, their questions, anything they may want to know about the project in order to better repair that bridge, better repair that relation. We need to let the community propose plans to modify the design. However, we do not want to implement the community's recommendations unequivocally. We know that perhaps they are also biased and they are also flawed. In one example, the Igwe could be holding too much power, and the ordinary citizens could not be well represented. That is why we want to put these suggestions into a 3-4-5 values chart and the DAISY model contextual engineering and incorporate them by using these charts to develop a solution that the community is allowed to fine tune. Step 3 is more specific and tailored to the exact values of the region. And since we know that the region is heavily influenced politically, politics is one of the key issues in constructing the water system. Firstly, we want to make sure that every single kindred is equally connected to the water system. We know that by not connecting each kindred, we can fracture the already divided political region even more, and that could cause instability in the system, that would cause strife, and it would not allow the community to truly own the system, as the water board would come into great conflict. Secondly, we want to give to the Igwe as much authority as possible. We want to defer a lot of the roles of the water board and a lot of the roles of the operators who collect the fees to the Igwe. This is because the community is obviously traumatized by years of British colonialism, and they don't really trust foreign or Western power structures. Therefore, by deferring to the local power structure, we can ensure that the community really wants and actually is willing to integrate with our project and integrate with the politics of our project. Step 4 is the education value of the community, another factor which would influence the design of our system. We know that the community is willing to learn, and we know that they are very knowledgeable, so we want to rely on that knowledge as much as possible. We want to build the system according to their current knowledge. That would mean abandoning the pressurization idea and replacing it with something more familiar. I would propose replacing it with something the community plumbers already know how to implement. While that may require adding additional steps like filters to the front of our process, they can obviously learn those things as long as it is something that they're comfortable with and they know how to do. Therefore, by using this community knowledge, it leverages one of their cultural strengths and helps us build closer ties with the group. Lastly, we want to use community resources available to us. This can range from hiring local workers to using local resources and materials such as pipes, bricks, whatever you name it. Local resources makes it feel like the community truly owns the project and the community is really coming together to build this. By using what's available to the community, we make it feel like the community is doing it, and it enhances the capability of the community to maintain the project in the long run as well. After all these steps, I believe we can help implement the project in a more contextual and rigorous fashion. Thank you.
Okay, so for the next part, we have the revisions to better reflection contextual engineering. As a group, we think that as a contextual engineering, the first thing we should do is conduct a further assessment of the community and its context. We should obtain through understanding of the community needs and desires, how the community thinks, what they need, how it's going to be more easily for them to develop this water system. In thinking all of this context, we define 5 factors. First, identify the evaluation of the objectives, define the evaluation questions, identify the participants or the stakeholders, carry out the evaluation, and finally analyze the results. The second factor is to take into account the social, cultural, and economic factors. Here we see conduct a contextual analysis where we identify the needs and expectation of the community, establish partnerships and collaborations. And this is really important because not always we focus on the community we are working in, but we also see the community that are surrounding, that are in the environment with them. So it's going to be more easily and healthy development for everyone. Then we have the adapt project to a local to make easily for them to work with this project system, well, with this project water, sorry, and finally conduct ongoing evaluation. Then we have to review the proposed plans and decisions to ensure that they reflect the community context. This on the way that if there are gaps in knowledge, if there are stakeholder relationship and are identified that were misplaced during the assessment, we have to well, we should take some steps that will is are gonna be taken to repair them. And finally, we have the long-term sustainability of the project. And here, as a group, we structure some questions that make easily develop this part. And first is how we'll ensure that the project will continue to function after construction is complete. I mean, in the long terms, how the project will still working, how the community will develop with these systems, or also see if other communities can also use or implement this project, and how will you involve the community in the operation and maintenance of the water systems. Also, a relationated with the last questions, and how basically the project will continue working after this group that implemented is not going they are not going to be working there anymore, and it's all up to the community.
Okay, well, now we have the last part, project outcome. So, okay, the context can affect the outcome of the project. As a group, we realized that for any project, the context is directly related. Being able to understand the needs of the community help us to give the best possible approach for the water system, and knowing the difficulties they are going through and knowing the internal problems they may have are important for the development of the project. And we as contextual engineers have the duty to adapt, understand, and also help the community to solve any problems that may affect the implementation of the water system. And in order to define the project as successful, we must take into account all the information that can be obtained from the community members. This information help us to know if the project will work not only in a short term, but also in a long term. And the context can affect the outcome of the project, because if we don't take it into account, we can negatively affect certain members of the community or even the entire community. It is important to talk to the members and learn about their culture, customs, and beliefs, in addition to the factors already mentioned, in order to implement the system and make it functional. And that would be all. Thanks for your attention.